Alright, so just a pretty important PSA I kind of want to really start off before we talk about anything. And that is the fact that food stamps got cut out for me and for my mother. And that is obviously not something that's really good. And when it comes down to it, that's literally how we survive from month to month. And just not having that is easily the biggest blow to us when it comes down to it. It's already frustrating enough, but I hate even more worse to see obviously my mom going through it too, which she really shouldn't have to. And that's why I got the Kofi in the comment section below. If you can do anything to help out, just to give us a way to survive, and that's kind of the reason why, I've been trying to press a lot of the Kofi out a little bit more, because I had a feeling something like this was going to happen, and it did. And, that's just kind of how it is. At least 200 a month would be like the way of survival, at least to have something in our house to go out and eat and have like to store up for food. And that's just kind of how it is. And if you can again help with that, that'll be very much appreciated. Like, you really won't know how much that means to us. Okay, first things first, I was not expecting y'all to actually want me to, or at least a few of you wanted me to kind of do a bit of wrestling content every now and again. And I'm not necessarily gonna lie, I kind of had a feeling in my soul for a moment, unlike Cody Rhodes' soul or John Cena's, but essentially where, I might gonna have to do a wrestling video at some point in time. I don't know when, I don't know how, but yesterday ended up being that time where, we did a wrestling video, which is something I was not trying to do, but it was too much of an important moment. I'm sorry. So, when it comes down to it, I know a lot of people have asked in that comment section to be like, oh yeah, do a wrestling video or so every now and again. And I kind of never really intended to. Like, don't get me wrong, I will, if we had live streaming capabilities, we watching pay-per-views. We watching some episodes of like Raw or SmackDown for sure. But when it comes down to it though, I didn't want to make this a whole like anime, gaming, and wrestling channel. And that's kind of like the thing I didn't want to necessarily sit here and do. And that's why I kind of hint at tease and times, where wrestling jokes could be jabbed into certain videos and stuff. So ultimately, will I do wrestling content? Not really. And if it's something huge, overly huge, maybe I might talk about it. But I really just want to talk about that one because that was just 20 something years in the making of that happening. But if y'all really are that persistent for more wrestling content, I could do maybe a few more videos, because again, I don't mind doing it, but I don't want the whole channel to be bombarded by wrestling stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe a top 10 wrestlers, or the best theme songs in wrestling. Can't play any music, but still something like that to that effect. And maybe something up to that note. But so it's not out of the question, but I don't want to focus my entire content on wrestling. So there is very much that, even though I've been a diehard wrestling fan since I was a child. So, it is what it is. But we'll figure it out we'll figure it out. Just leave some comments. But anyway, today I don't want to talk about wrestling, as crazy as it's been. I want to talk about God slaying, and mainly the same trope that you've seen in a lot of JRPGs. I've seen it, you've seen it. It's a trope that, let's just keep very much stacked, we probably are all mad tired of. Let's just be absolutely real. It is a trope where at some point in the game, or at some point in the show, the enemy was God all along, and now we kill him and we are mad happy about it, right? I'm not necessarily going to sit here and lie. There is two reasons that I don't necessarily like the trope. One is because obviously it's been done to death. We've seen it time and time again. It happens in multiple different games and multiple different reasons. And it's just always something that, oh no, the enemy was the church all along, or something like that. And we kind of have an idea for it, which is something I kind of speak about in the metaphor video that I'll probably drop later today. So be on the lookout for that. And, I kind of also went into this discussion of it a little bit too. So when it comes down to it, yeah, it's always usually that damn trope that always persists. So that's one reason. And then on a more personal reason for me is because I do have a faith in Christianity. I do believe in Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit, and basically the whole 9 yards that you can probably guess. And when it comes down to it, for a long time before I really have an open mind to look into things, I always found this idea offensive, mainly because in the West, especially in the West more so, because there is times where they will take this trope of, or essentially take the faith of Christianity or whatever essentially attached to it and make it a joke or make it a mockery in some shape or form. And I always hate it. And I still do to this day. Really hate it when people just do that because they just can. And I never understood why it's so specifically this one religion that people hate. Right? I get it. There's a multitude of reasons, but I never liked it at all, and I absolutely get angry when it happens. Case in point, remember the time when I basically went after Jaden Animation's whole ass when it came down to the waifu material video? Yeah, I was pissed because of that reason, and that was the reason why. And granted, you could say definitely that's uncalled for and all that type of stuff. Sure, but I'm just so utterly tired of people just making fun of it. At least for me, and that's the reason why. That's probably like the biggest bad flaw for me, right? I'll definitely take that, and that's probably like an L take. If I got a copy like Castanet, might be an L take though, but that's just genuinely how I feel. I just want people to respect things, and just whatever, even if it's not Christianity or anything like that, just respect people's beliefs and not necessarily go after them like, oh, we could just say whatever the hell we want to and then think nothing of it, because like, come on, dude, people believe this shit for a living and we kind of deal with it. Now granted, I know I'm not the most model Christian of all time. I literally cuss a lot. I obviously, this channel is a channel of just a lot of wild and nonsense that would not be looked upon in the smiling face, but that's just kind of how it is for me personally. This is not a model life of what you should have. This is not how it should be represented. But that being said, that's just kind of how it is for me. And to add one more thing to this, essentially a lot of people, when it comes down to the faith entirely, essentially they just be like, they don't believe in anything or anything of the sort like that. They don't want to give it any attention because they had a bad faith experience or things like that, where they obviously would blame God and stuff like that. And that's kind of how also it feeds into that trope too. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how that realistically works. I mean, granted, to each their own, but that's not how it works. That's not how it is, at least from what I believe and what I know. But I don't want to get too deep into that because obviously that goes into a lot of different territory, and that's not the focus of the video. But the point is, there is plenty of reasons as to why God slaying is like a thing, and why people obviously have the reasons for hating God or the idea of it in all sorts of ways. But I find the Japanese way of why they do it is so much more fascinating, and it's so much more like, oh, I get it, right? Like, it feels that way. This all kind of really stems from one idea of just like, why do people hate it so much? And then two, why is it so prominent in Japanese like culture and all that sort of stuff? And this really comes from a video basically talking about this very same subject about God slaying JRPGs, and that is a very, very, very insightful video, and I'll probably put it in the comment section if I remember to. But when it comes down to it though, I was basically unaware of how this all came about. Essentially, if we had to mark it up to one word, it's just money. That's it. Really, when it came down to it, Japan has been stuck in a dang time loop for really like 30 years since the 80s or so. Has it been 30 years in the 80s? I think it has. Maybe. No, it's probably older than that. Probably like 40s. Maybe. I don't know. I can't math. But the point is, they've been stuck in this loop for a long period of time. And when it comes down to it, when you really think of the corporations and think of how they have to work and they live for the company, they die for the company and all that type of stuff, and how much of that is ingrained into the culture and even society over there itself, when it comes down to how, oh, if you basically leave work early, you're shamed upon, or you come 1 minute late, you're basically going to have to get on your knees and suck the dick of the bosses and all that type of stuff. And essentially, it's like, oh, you kind of see where they got it. They kind of get this from, because essentially their businesses and their all that type of stuff and how the hierarchy kind of works, a lot of that feels like it is some type of unbeatable god or some type of crazy deity or some type of sort of thing like that. And that's why you get that trope as it is, because it's just basically a sign of, yeah, Japanese people are oppressed by these corporations and such, like this has been put into place, and things of the sort like that, right? You can kind of piece things together. I'm basically kind of paraphrasing what that video did, and again, that's why I'm like, I highly encourage you to go find that video and just watch it, because it genuinely goes into a lot of things that I was not even aware of, right? Outside of like Bill Wurtz's History of Japan, I guess, video, but still, that doesn't really tell you anything outside of, damn, America was a damn bully to Japan a lot of the time, and still kind of is. Now, granted, I would say this is probably the reason for modern Japan to feel the way they do about God slaying and how it's like in these games. But you also had like the fact that there was a point in time where certain, ideas from outside Japan did come in, and then they did try to have Christianity there, but then, the government kind of took control of that, and then essentially they just murdered everybody for it, and that's just kind of how it was. Then you also had the fact that the government and state was also like combined together and things of sort like that. And there's just plenty of reasons as to why Japan is the way it is when it comes down to religion and stuff like that. While it's mainly like, I would even argue that the way they kind of have certain, I guess, like Shintoism or whatever, essentially it feels more like a system of, we kind of do it because it's what you're supposed to do. It's like part of the culture, but not really believe in it. Because if you really think about it, you would think gods would be held up into like a high regard. But a lot of time we see them in anime and they kind of get in weird positions, or they get put into like, crazy situations that they normally wouldn't be in and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like they just say, yeah, it's there, but at the end of the day, we just kind of use it for whatever. And I think that's also why it's so, I guess, painfully obvious why so many different anime and so many different games have like their godlike figures, but then at the same time, it's not really the exact same god that we kind of have an idea of what it is, at least in the West. Because obviously, when you see like something like Tanya, the Saga of Evil, or something of the line of like 100 Girlfriends That Really Like You and their god in that show, and just plenty of different shows and examples from anime, they're all vastly different in different takes. Right? And it's like, that's not how that works, right? I'm pretty sure in Tanya, this one deity wouldn't necessarily try to be so like hard focused on trying to convert Tanya over. I don't think that's how that would work, honestly. And now it's more like, I don't see Tanya fighting against like a deity. I see him fighting against a devil, essentially. And when it comes down to it, it's like, no, your ass is gonna be this way, you blonde sexy bitch. And essentially Tanya's like, no, I'm good on that, and rebels against the machine. And again, with the previous context that now, it's like, oh, I get why it's like that. And then with that added context, it's like, oh, I understand why, lots of characters side with like demons and devils and try to fight against gods in some shape and form. And that's just kind of how it is. Why, concepts like, devil Jin is praised, or something like the devil's a part-timer, and all that stuff is being used in the context it's being used because it's against the oppression machine of what Japanese people go through. Like, I get it now, right? And it's like, it's very obvious when you get the damn context. And while I do understand it and why it's a trope in every game, almost in every single like story when it comes to anime and such, that doesn't necessarily mean, at least for me personally, I still care about the trope done in that same way, right? Because obviously, fighting against God is basically their freedom in Japan. Oh, that's why you get many stories of why people in different games kind of be like, we don't need God, we'll do this on our own. Because it's like, no, essentially what they're really saying is that, no, we don't need these companies and these corporations controlling our lives. We'll live in the way we need to with our own freedom, and that's essentially how it is, right? But in a more face value sort of, I guess, way of taking it, it definitely does come off as like, nah, we're better than a higher power and things of sort like that, which is what you get in a lot of these shows. Now, for me personally, when it comes down to writing my own story, and yes, I'm always going to go into a tangent where I'm writing about my own damn story and talking about it, essentially, obviously, because I live in the West and I have a very much different worldview, and I'm very much more in the know about, the Bible and things of sort like that, especially since, whether, I don't think any of you guys know this, but my mom is a prophetess too, so I kind of have to hear it all the time, which I don't mind. But still, nonetheless, though, my perspective of how a story can go can be very much different, at least in terms of what I kind of will write down. For example, and I will probably go down this route in the story, we will probably team up with God at some point, or a godlike character in that story, and then essentially take down Despair, which is like the ultimate evil, the ultimate devil, or something like that. And that's just gonna be how it is. Not because, oh, we're being controlled to or anything like that, but genuinely because siding with God is the right way. And it's not because of how, the oppression is when it comes to Japan and their stories and how they kind of do it, but it's more so just my take of it and how I would want a story to kind of go about, while also kind of having other different narratives in that I probably won't outright say unless I just feel like doing so. Heck, one of Jay's forms in that show, the purification form, is basically, I guess, like a subtext for, a divine power that he awakened within himself, essentially, and things of sort like that. And as the story goes on, and as I kind of tease with the opening to this whole next arc, essentially, he does get another transformation at some point in time, but it's going to be a different type of transformation, and we'll go down that rabbit hole when we do get to that point, though. And to be honest, I kind of find it low-key kind of funny how I kind of done that story, because unintentionally so and subconsciously I kind of added certain things into it without really thinking, and I'm just like, oh, this will be cool here, this will be cool there, and I'm just like, oh, I'm adding stuff that I didn't really think about too hard, but it's kind of linking up in some weird way. Like, for example, the Guardians of Despair, the whole group that Shitoya and Saratome is a part of, like, if you took the first letter of the word, it's literally God. So I unintentionally, I didn't really think about it. I was just like, what would be a good group name to stop despair and kind of protect everybody else? The Guardians. They could be some type of Guardians of Despair, I suppose. I was not thinking that at all, and I'm just like, oh wow, I was not thinking that in the slightest. But you get the point, though. Essentially, is that I want to try to take that trope into a different route, right? Where it's less of a controlling God that's over you, but more so like still being the power within the person's hands, but done differently. I don't want to go too far into it because I already know how I kind of want to go about that, but definitely there is a way I think we can shape it up to kind of make it look like, it's not always the evil God or something like that, but it could be just literal darkness being on some dumb shit, and that just kind of be how it is, right? So at least for me, when it comes to my series, I would definitely be writing it a very much different way than what Western people would, at least hopefully, and then how Japanese people would, essentially, right? Hopefully kind of hitting both areas now that I know the context of how it's kind of written with this type of trope and stuff. So that's just kind of how it is for me. But what I really wanted to say in this entire video is essentially I am not, at least on the Japanese side, mad for the most part of why the god slaying thing happens. I am not mad at them kind of having that as a story element, because it is what it is. It is a part of what the Japanese identity is from birth, really, and to keep it very much a stack, it is an oppressive system, and I would like to hope society would change in Japan a little bit to actually wake the hell up and be like, oh shit, we're kind of effing ourselves in the worst possible way. Let's kind of fix that, right? And some people have, and some companies are starting to wake up a little bit, but it's clearly not a lot. And when it comes down to it, this is kind of the reason why Japan is in the terrible situation that they are in terms as a whole country. So, it's not necessarily the greatest thing. But obviously, definitely, I really just wanted to understand more about, why was this a thing? Why is this a thing that constantly happens in all these games? And now I get why. Granted, does it have to always be in this exact same way? No, but I do think there's a way you could change it up and fix it up in a way where it doesn't have to be like that, right? So, it is what it is on that front. And to be honest, and I guess I'll just leave off with some life advice here. Essentially, when it comes down to all this god slaying or siding with devils or things of sort like that, when it comes down to it, in my terms of life, of how I kind of live, is that we are basically the choices that we make. And essentially what that means is, if you do a good choice, it might lead to something. If you do a bad choice, it might lead into something. Again, it really can be a topsy-turvy type of situation no matter what choice you make. But still, it is definitely a choice that, you have to make at the end of the day. in terms of what you do, whether it's to eat, whether it's to not, whether it's to do whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's just ultimately you live your life the way you think you should, in your own understanding and things of sort like that. So at the end of the day, whether it is an overarching god or whether it's a weird, creepy looking devil, at the end of the day, you make your choices, because at least on that front, good and bad really can't essentially happen without essentially that consent of you making a choice. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter kind of what we do, choices will always be in our hands regardless whether we realize it or not. And that's just kind of one thing I do firmly believe, honestly. So at the end of the day, just make your choices worth it, I would say. And that's really the best thing I can tell you. But ultimately, that's really all I want to say for this one. I know it kind of went a little, more crazier than I wanted to, but, it is what it is. And plus, this topic, there was like no real way of kind of skirting around this subject without going in depth about it in the ways it did. Because I can't really talk about this in ways, without, going into certain things. So that's just going to be how it is. But hopefully you still enjoyed. If you did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification on your way out. Also follow my socials. And if you'd like to donate to the channel, Kofi and Cash App is available as well. But until then, it's your boy Jay, sign off. Have a blessed day.